Unmarried, classless, probably abandoned, rummaging through leftovers. Her words, laced with cruel contempt, strike a chord with Cella, a 29-year-old black nurse who is 7 months pregnant. At San Diego's elite hospital, Cella, resplendent, a simple floral maternity dress, faces not care but humiliation, falsely accused of stealing by a racist doctor. But what Catherine doesn't know is that Cella's husband James, a relentless force, is running to her side. Will justice prevail when power meets prejudice? Tune in to find out. We'd love to know where you're listening. Drop it below, subscribe, and ring the bell for our latest stories. Don't miss this remarkable tale of courage. The San Diego sunrise spilled over the hills like liquid gold, painting the quiet streets with a promise of hope. Cella Thompson stood on the porch of her new home, her silhouette framed against the dawn's tender glow. At 29, she carried the grace of a woman who'd seen the world's edges, sharp, unyielding, yet softened by love. 7 months pregnant, her deep brown skin shimmered under the morning light, and her simple white maternity dress, adorned with delicate floral patterns, danced lightly in the breeze. One hand rested on her rounded belly, feeling the faint stir of the life within, while the other clutched a worn leather tote bag, its creases telling stories of 1,000 shifts as a nurse in Chicago's bustling hospitals. Cella's eyes, sharp yet kind, traced the horizon. She and her husband, James, had left the Windy City's relentless grind for this coastal haven, chasing a dream of safety and serenity for their first child. James, a contract negotiator with a mind as incisive as his tailored suits, was in Los Angeles this morning, finalizing a deal that could anchor their future. His voice had crackled through the phone at 6 a.m., steady but laced with regret. "I'll be back by noon, love. I hate missing this." Cella had smiled, her heart warmed by his devotion. "We'll be fine, James. Just hurry." Now, standing alone, she whispered to her unborn child, "Let's make sure you're doing okay, little one." The words were a shield against the quiet ache of James's absence. Today was her prenatal checkup at Pacific Crest Medical Center, a gleaming fortress of wealth and prestige. Cella, practical and fiercely independent, had arranged a driver, unwilling to navigate the sprawling city's roads in her condition. As the black sedan pulled up, she adjusted her tote bag, its weight a familiar comfort, and stepped into the car, the scent of leather mingling with her faint lavender perfume. Sighting. Drive to Pacific Crest was a study in contrasts. Outside, San Diego hummed with life, joggers weaving through palm-lined paths, retirees sipping coffee at sidewalk cafes, the ocean's breath lingering in the air. Inside the car, Cella's thoughts churned. Moving to California had been a leap of faith, a chance to escape the microaggressions that had shadowed her nursing career in Chicago. Yet, as the hospital's glass facade loomed ahead, a prickle of unease settled in her chest. Pacific Crest was a world apart from the public. Clinics she knew, its reputation built on catering to the elite. Would she, in her modest dress, be seen as an outsider? The sedan glided to a stop, and Cella stepped onto the polished stone walkway, her sandals whispering against the pavement. The hospital rose before her like a cathedral of modernity, glass panels reflecting the sky, chrome accents glinting with cold precision. She smoothed her dress, her nurse's instincts kicking in, straightening her posture to meet whatever lay inside. The automatic doors hissed open, and she crossed the threshold, the air conditioning a sharp contrast to the morning's warmth. The lobby was a symphony of opulence. Chandeliers cast prisms across marble floors, leather armchairs invited no one to linger, and flower arrangements stood too perfect to be real. Cella's dress, though clean and elegant, felt like a whisper in a room shouting wealth. Eyes followed her, subtle, fleeting, but unmistakable. A white couple near the entrance glanced her way, their hands tightening on designer bags. A janitor paused his mop, then looked away. Cella's heart quickened, but she pushed it down, her years as a nurse teaching her to navigate spaces that questioned her presence. At the reception desk, a young woman with a tight blonde bun looked up, her smile more reflex than warmth. "Good morning. Cella said, her voice clear and professional. Cella Thompson, 10:01 a.m. with Dr. Catherine Wells. The receptionist's eyes flicked over her, lingering on the tote bag, the dress, the absence of a diamond ring flashing wealth. Thompson? She repeated, as if the name didn't fit the surroundings. Her fingers tapped the keyboard with deliberate slowness. "Fill this out," she said, sliding a clipboard across the counter without meeting Cella's gaze. Cella took the clipboard, her smile unwavering but her fingers tightening slightly. She settled into a leather chair, the cold material a stark contrast to her warmth. The forms were routine: name, medical history, insurance, but each pen stroke felt like a declaration of her right to be here. Across the lobby, a woman in a Chanel scarf whispered to her companion, their eyes darting toward Cella before snapping away. An older man waiting with a newspaper shifted uncomfortably, his gaze fixed on the floor. Cella's phone buzzed, a text from James. "Stuck in traffic? Be there by 10:30. She exhaled, a mix of relief and longing. This was their first major checkup in California, a milestone to see their baby's heartbeat, to feel the promise of their new life. Alone, she felt exposed, the weight of the lobby's silent judgments pressing against her. Yet, she was a nurse, a woman who'd faced down chaos in emergency rooms, who'd held hands through pain and triumph. She wouldn't falter now. As she finished the forms, a nurse called her name. Her tone clipped, her eyes scanning Cella like a barcode. Cella rose, her hand brushing her belly, a silent promise to her child. She followed the nurse down a pristine hallway, the soft hum of classical music doing little to ease the tension coiling within her. The portraits on the walls, smiling white mothers cradling newborns, seemed to watch her pass, their eyes asking, "Do you belong?" Cella lifted her, chin her steps steady, her heart whispering, "I do." The exam room door loomed ahead, a gateway to care or confrontation. Cella stepped inside, unaware that the morning's soft dawn was about to give way to a storm. The exam room at Pacific Crest Medical Center was a sterile sanctuary, its walls a blinding white that seemed to mute the world outside. Cella Thompson, perched on the edge of the examination table, her 7-month pregnant belly cradled by a simple white maternity dress, its soft floral patterns a quiet defiance against the room's clinical chill. The air held a faint lavender scent, undercut by the sharp bite of antiseptic, and a blinking ultrasound monitor cast a ghostly blue glow across the counter. Cella's deep brown skin shimmered under the fluorescent light, her face a portrait of resilience, though her sharp eyes flickered with unease. She glanced at her phone. 10:07 a.m. A text from James glowed on the screen. Traffic jam there by 10:30. Her lips curved in a fleeting smile, but the solitude in this polished space pressed against her like a tightening vice. As a nurse, Cella had faced countless exam rooms, their routines as familiar as her own heartbeat. But this one was different, its silence thick with an unspoken challenge. She smoothed her dress, her fingers tracing the fabric's gentle weave, grounding herself in its familiarity. This was a routine checkup, a moment to hear her baby's heartbeat, to glimpse the life she and James were nurturing. Yet, the lobby's cold stares, the receptionist's dismissive tone, the whispered judgments of designer-clad patients, clung to her like damp fog. She whispered to her belly, "We're okay, little one," her voice a soft tether against the rising tide of anxiety. The door opened with a soft click, and Dr. Catherine Wells swept in like a winter storm cloaked in white. Her coat was pristine, starched to a razor's edge, her blonde hair pulled into a bun so severe it seemed to sharpen her features. Her blue eyes, cold as Arctic ice, raked over Cella, not with a physician's curiosity, but with a predator's scorn. No greeting, no handshake, no trace of warmth, only a silence that stretched like a taut wire, deliberate and cutting. Cella straightened, her nurse's instincts flaring, ready to meet the challenge head-on. "Cella Thompson?" Catherine's voice was a scalpel, each syllable dripping with condescension, as if the name were a clerical error. She stood rigid, clipboard clutched like a shield, her gaze lingering on Cella's dress, her worn tote bag, the bare fingers unadorned by ostentatious rings. "Yes, good morning," Cella replied, her tone polished but unyielding, forged in years of proving her place in spaces that questioned her. "I'm here for my routine checkup and ultrasound." Catherine's lips curled into a smirk, venomous and sharp, a smile that never reached her eyes. "Alone, I see," she said, the words heavy with accusation, as if Cella's solitude were a moral failing. "No husband? Or has he abandoned you, left you to scrape by?" The implication was a blade slicing through the air, suggesting unworthiness, disposability. Cella's jaw tightened, her pulse hammering in her ears. She'd faced prejudice before, whispers in hospital corridors, patients doubting her expertise. But this was raw, unfiltered hatred laid bare like an open wound. "My husband's delayed by work," she said evenly, her voice a fortress. "He's on his way." "Of course," Catherine murmured, her tone mocking as she turned to the counter, adjusting papers with theatrical precision, each movement a performance of disdain. She pivoted back, her eyes narrowing to slits. "Let me be frank, Miss Thompson. Pacific Crest isn't a charity ward. We cater to women who belong here, who value their care. Not—" Her gaze swept over Cella again, lingering on the dress's modest hem. "Not women who wander in alone, looking like they've stumbled off a bus, expecting handouts." Cella's breath caught, the words a lash across her soul. Her hands clenched at her sides, nails biting into her palms, but her nurse's training held her steady, a dam against the flood of anger. "I'm a registered nurse, Dr. Wells," she said, her voice low but forged in steel. "I scheduled this appointment, confirmed it, and came prepared. I expect to be treated with respect." Catherine stepped closer, her smirk twisting into something darker, more personal. "Respect?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper, the lavender scent of the room overwhelmed by her expensive perfume. "You people always demand respect, don't you? Strutting into places you don't belong, bringing chaos and excuses. This is my hospital, and I won't have it tainted by someone like you." The air turned brittle, the room shrinking under the weight of Catherine's hatred. Cella's heart pounded, her baby shifting inside her as if sensing the storm. She stood, her height matching Catherine's, her dignity a quiet inferno. "I'm here for my child's health," she said, each word a deliberate strike. "Your personal biases have no place in this room." Catherine's eyes flashed, her composure fracturing like thin ice. "Biases?" she snapped, stepping so close Cella could see the faint lines of rage etched around her mouth. "I see exactly what you are, a nobody in a cheap dress playing at being a patient. You think you can walk in here and demand my time? You're nothing but a—" She stopped, the unspoken slur hanging like a guillotine, its weight heavier than any word she could have uttered. Cella's fists trembled, but she held Catherine's gaze, her voice steady as granite. "I'm a mother, a wife, a professional," she said, each title a shield. "I belong here as much as anyone. You don't get to decide my worth." Catherine's laugh was a brittle, ugly thing, echoing off the sterile walls. "Your worth?" she sneered, circling Cella like a vulture. "You're a nurse, you say? Then you should know your place, behind the counter, not in my exam room. Pretending to be something you're not." She paused, her eyes glinting with malice. "I've seen your kind before. You come, you take, and you leave nothing but trouble." Cella's chest tightened, her baby's movements a reminder of why she endured. She wanted to scream, to tear down the walls of this pristine cage, but she held her ground, her dignity unbowed. "You don't know me," she said softly, but with a fire that burned through the room, "and you don't get to define me." Catherine's face twisted, her control slipping. "Oh, I know enough," she spat, her voice rising. "And I'll make sure everyone else does too." She turned toward the door, her hand hovering over the handle, as if poised to summon the next act of her cruelty. The room pulsed with tension. The ultrasound monitors hummed the only sound, a heartbeat waiting to be heard. Cella stood tall, her eyes locked on Catherine, ready for whatever came next. The storm was here, and she would face it. The exam room at Pacific Crest Medical Center was a pressure cooker, its sterile walls closing in as the air crackled with hostility. Cella Thompson stood tall, her 7-month pregnant belly a quiet testament to her strength. Her simple white maternity dress with its floral patterns a stark contrast to the room's clinical glare. Her deep brown skin glowed under the harsh fluorescence, but her sharp eyes burned with defiance, locked on Dr. Catherine Wells. The doctor's venomous words, "You're nothing but a," still echoed, the unspoken slur a wound that hung between them. Cella's heart pounded, her baby shifting restlessly, as if sensing the storm. She'd held her ground, declaring her worth as a mother, wife, and nurse. But Catherine's malice was a tide, relentless and rising. Catherine's face twisted, her icy blue eyes glinting with a predator's glee. She stepped back, her starched white coat rustling, and glanced at her wrist with theatrical precision. "My bracelet," she gasped, her voice a calculated crescendo. "Diamond, custom-made, worth more than you'll ever see. It was right here on this counter." Her gaze snapped to Cella, sharp and accusing. "And now it's gone." Cella's breath hitched, the accusation a punch to her gut. Her hands instinctively cradled her belly, shielding the life within. "I haven't touched anything," she said, her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her chest. "I've been sitting here speaking to you." Catherine's smirk was a blade, cruel and deliberate. "Oh, please," she sneered, circling the counter as if inspecting a crime scene. "You expect me to believe that? You, alone, in my exam room, with your history of demanding things you don't deserve." The words dripped with racial venom, each one a calculated barb. She leaned closer, her perfume a cloying mask over the antiseptic sting. "I know you're kind. You see something valuable and you take it." Cella's fists clenched, her nails biting into her palms. Her nurse's training screamed for calm, but the injustice burned like fire. "I'm not a thief," she said, her voice low but unyielding. "You have no evidence, no right to accuse me. I came here for my baby's care, nothing else." Catherine's laugh was a brittle shard, slicing through the room. "Evidence?" she mocked, her eyes narrowing to slits. "You're the only one who's been in this room. That's evidence enough." She straightened, her posture regal, as if pronouncing a verdict. "Security!" she called, her voice echoing down the hall like a summons to judgment. The door burst open, and 2 security guards stormed in, their boots heavy on the polished floor. The older one, grizzled with a clipboard tucked under his arm, wore a mask of institutional indifference. The younger, bulkier, chewed gum with a slow, disdainful rhythm, his eyes raking over Cella as if she were already guilty. "Miss Thompson," the older guard barked, "you're coming with us." Cella's heart raced, her baby's movements a frantic pulse against her fear. She stood her ground, her height matching the guards. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice trembling, but resolute. "I'm 7 months pregnant. I've done nothing wrong. I demand to know what's happening." "Save it for the security office," the younger guard snapped, stepping forward, his bulk a looming threat. "Move." His tone left no room for negotiation, his hand hovering near his belt as if daring her to resist. Catherine folded her arms, her smirk triumphant. "Take her," she ordered as if directing a play, "and make sure she doesn't touch anything else." She turned back to Cella, her voice a venomous whisper. "You thought you could walk in here and belong? You'll learn your place." Cella's chest tightened, her breath shallow but her dignity held like iron. "You're wrong," she said softly, her eyes boring into Catherine's, "and you'll see how wrong." The words were a promise, a spark in the gathering dark. The guards flanked her, their presence a physical weight. Cella adjusted her tote bag, her movements deliberate, and followed them through the door, her sandals whispering against the floor. The hallway was a sterile labyrinth, its walls lined with framed portraits of white mothers cradling newborns, their smiles mocking her as she passed. The soft hum of classical music felt like a lie, masking the rot beneath the hospital's polished facade. The guards led her through back corridors, away from patient eyes, past locked cabinets and staff doors, the air thick with bleach and bureaucracy. They reached a gray, unmarked door, its surface scuffed and cold. The younger guard pushed it open, revealing a dim security room lit by a flickering fluorescent panel. A metal desk sat in the center, flanked by filing cabinets, and a wall of grainy monitors showed fragmented views of the hospital. A single plastic chair bolted to the floor waited like a throne of shame. "Sit," the older guard ordered, his tone mechanical. Cella hesitated, her hands trembling as she adjusted her dress. "I need my phone," she said, her voice firm despite the fear coiling in her gut. "I need to call my husband." "Hand it over," the younger guard barked, snatching her tote bag and rifling through it. He pulled out her phone, turned it off with a sneer, and tossed it into a drawer with a dull thunk. "You're detained until we sort this out." Detained? For what? Cella's voice rose, her nurse's authority breaking through. "You have no evidence, no report, nothing but her word. This is unlawful." The older guard scribbled on his clipboard, avoiding her eyes. "Dr. Wells reported a theft," he muttered. "You're the suspect, that's protocol." Cella sat slowly, the chair's cold plastic biting through her dress. Her hands rested on her belly, fingertips trembling as her baby shifted. A quiet plea for safety. "This is wrong," she said, her voice soft but steely. "I came here for care, not to be treated like a criminal." The younger guard leaned against the wall, his gum chewing louder now, a taunt. "Lady, save the speech," he said, his lips curling. "You're in the wrong place for sympathy." Cella's lip quivered, but she clenched her jaw, swallowing. The scream that clawed at her throat. Her body ached, her stomach tightened, the weight of injustice pressing down like a stone. She inhaled deeply, counting her breaths as she'd done in countless emergencies, a shield against panic. The monitors flickered, the fluorescent light buzzed, and the room felt like a cage. Minutes crawled by, each one an eternity. Cella stared. At the blank wall, her mind racing. She pictured James, his calm strength, his promise to be there. He was out there somewhere, closing the distance. She clung to that thought, a lifeline in the dark as the footsteps of her accusers faded down the hall. The glass doors of Pacific Crest Medical Center gleamed under the San Diego sun, a facade of wealth and care that masked the storm brewing. Within, at 10:35 a.m., James Thompson strode through them, his tailored navy suit a sharp contrast to the sterile lobby's marble and chrome. His dark mahogany skin caught the light, his tall frame radiating a controlled intensity, honed by years as a contract negotiator. Beside him walked Marcus Reed, his best friend and a senior civil rights attorney, whose piercing eyes scanned the room like a hawk. James's phone had buzzed minutes earlier, with a frantic message from Cella's driver. "She's been taken to security." The words had ignited a fury in him, now forged into a blade of purpose. His polished black shoes clicked against the floor, each step a drumbeat of resolve. The lobby was a cathedral of opulence, its chandeliers casting prisms across leather armchairs, but James saw none of it. His eyes were locked on the reception desk, where the same blonde woman who'd dismissed Cella looked up, her smile faltering under his gaze. "Good morning," James said, his voice deep and calm, but laced with an authority that made the air tighten. "I'm James Thompson. My wife, Cella Thompson, had a 10-column appointment with Dr. Catherine Wells. Where is she?" The receptionist blinked, her fingers freezing above the keyboard, caught off guard by the weight of his presence. One moment, sir," she stammered, her eyes darting to the screen. "It says she's not in the exam room." Her voice wavered, sensing the storm in James's silence. "Where is she?" James leaned forward slightly, his tone still civil but unyielding, each word a demand. Marcus stepped up, his attorney's badge glinting in his hand, his voice smooth, but sharp. "We need her location now, no delays." The receptionist's face paled. She's In the security office, she admitted, her fingers trembling as she tapped the screen. There was an issue. A misunderstanding, I think. What? Shoo? James's voice hardened, his eyes boring into hers. The lobby seemed to shrink, the whispers of waiting patience fading under the weight of his question. My wife is 7 months pregnant. What possible issue justifies taking her to security? The receptionist opened her mouth, then closed it, her training no match for the man before her. I'm not sure, sir. Dr. Wells reported something. I can get the floor manager. No need, James cut in, his hand dipping into his jacket to produce a slim leather wallet. He opened it with practiced precision, revealing a federal contractor's ID, its seal gleaming with authority. I'm not here to wait. Take me to my wife, or I'll find her myself. He let the ID hang in her sight for a moment, then snapped. The wallet shut. The receptionist stood, her hands fumbling. Down the corridor, past the staff elevators, first door on the left, she blurted, pointing toward a side hallway. James turned without a word, his stride sharp and unwavering, Marcus matching his pace, his fingers curled tightly at his sides, the tension in his shoulders a silent promise of reckoning. He didn't rush. His control was absolute. But the fire in his chest burned hotter with every step. The hallway was a sterile maze, its walls lined with framed accolades that meant nothing to James. His mind was on Cella, alone, pregnant, facing who knew what in a place that should have been safe. He pictured her face, her sharp eyes, her unyielding spirit, and the thought of her in distress was a knife twisting in his gut. Marcus, sensing his friend's rage, placed a hand on his shoulder. We'll get her out, he said, his voice low. And we'll make this right. They reached a gray, unmarked door, its surface scuffed, slightly ajar. Muffled voices leaked through, clipped, officious, and one faint, familiar voice that made James's heart lurch. He pushed the door open, the hinges groaning under his force, and stepped into the dim security room. The space was a stark contrast to the lobby's grandeur. A flickering fluorescent light buzzed overhead. A metal desk sat flanked by filing. Cabinets and grainy monitors lined one wall. A single plastic chair, bolted to the floor, held Cella. She sat rigid, her hands resting protectively on her belly, her white dress a beacon in the gloom. Her face was a mask of defiance tempered by fear, her deep brown eyes wide with strain. 2 guards stood nearby, startled by the intrusion. The older one, grizzled and clutching a clipboard, straightened, while the younger, bulkier, stopped chewing his gum, his bravado faltering. "Who are you?" the younger guard demanded, but his voice cracked under James's gaze. James stepped fully into the room, his presence a silent thunderclap. "I'm her husband," he said, his tone low and lethal, each word a verdict. He moved to Cella's side, his hand gentle on her shoulder, his eyes never leaving the guards. "Are you okay, love?" Cella's head snapped toward him, a gasp, escaping her lips. "James," she whispered, tears brimming but unshed, relief flooding her face. "I'm okay now." Marcus produced his credentials, his voice cutting through the tension. "Marcus Reed, civil rights attorney, you've detained a pregnant woman without cause, confiscated her property, and violated her rights. I want the report authorizing this, the name of who ordered it, and her phone. Now." The guards froze, their authority crumbling like dry sand. The older one muttered, "It's protocol." "Your protocol is illegal," James interrupted, his voice a blade of ice. "You've detained my wife, humiliated her, and endangered her health. Explain why, or I'm calling the state attorney general." The younger guard took a step back, his gum still stuck in his mouth. The older one's eyes darted to the drawer where Cella's phone lay. The room went silent, the fluorescent buzz a mocking heartbeat. Cella gripped James's hand, her fingers trembling but strong, her fear giving way to hope. James stood tall, his suit a shield, his love a weapon. The guards didn't know it yet, but they'd awakened a force they couldn't contain. The security room at Pacific Crest Medical Center was a dim cage, its flickering fluorescent light casting jagged shadows across the metal desk and grainy, Monitors. Cella Thompson sat in the bolted plastic chair, her 7-month pregnant belly cradled by her white floral maternity dress, her deep brown skin a stark contrast to the room's bleakness. Her hands rested protectively on her stomach, her sharp eyes flickering with a mix of fear and defiance. James Thompson stood beside her, his tailored navy suit a shield, his hand gentle on her shoulder but his gaze a storm fixed on the 2 security guards. Marcus Reed, the civil rights attorney, loomed nearby, his credentials in hand, his voice a blade demanding answers. The air was brittle, charged with the weight of injustice, the fluorescent buzz a mocking pulse in the silence. James's voice cut through the tension, low and lethal. "You've detained my wife, a pregnant woman, without cause, confiscated her phone, and endangered her health. I want the report, the name of who ordered this, and the footage of the alleged theft. Now." His words were a verdict, each syllable honed by rage and resolve. The older guard, grizzled and clutching a clipboard, shifted uneasily, his institutional mask cracking. "It's protocol," he muttered, his eyes darting to the drawer where Cella's phone lay. The younger guard, bulkier, his gum-chewing stilled, took a step back, his bravado wilting under James's stare. "Protocol?" Marcus snapped, his attorney's badge glinting as he leaned forward. "Detaining a patient without evidence is a civil rights violation. Show me the footage, or this becomes obstruction." He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over the record button, a silent threat. The older guard hesitated, sweat beading at his temples, and moved to the wall console, his fingers fumbling over the controls. The monitors flickered, static giving, way to a grainy feed of the exam room. The timestamp read 10:05 a.m. Cella entered, calm and composed, touching nothing but the exam table. She sat, her hands folded, her tote bag untouched on the floor. The footage rolled forward. 10:12 a.m. Dr. Catherine Wells exited, glancing at the counter, her wrist bare, her face a mask of agitation. A silver tray gleamed, a diamond bracelet resting beside a tissue box. "There," Cella whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. She left it behind. James's eyes narrowed, his hand tightening on Cella's shoulder. "Freeze it," he ordered, his voice a blade. The guard complied, zooming in on the tray. The bracelet sparkled, untouched, undeniable. "Roll forward," James instructed, his tone unyielding. The footage skipped to 10:15 a.m. A cleaning attendant entered briefly, vacuuming the floor, never nearing the counter. 10:18 a.m. The bracelet remained. Then a gap. The feed cut to 10:25 a.m., the tray empty. James's head snapped to the guard. "Where's the rest?" The older guard swallowed, his voice faltering. "That's when the cleaning crew shifts. There's a blind spot in the handoff." "Convenient," James murmured, his voice silk-wrapped steel. His eyes flicked to the drawer. Without a word, he pulled it open, retrieving Cella's phone and handing it to her gently. Her fingers closed around it, a lifeline reclaimed. Before anyone could speak, the door burst open, and a young nurse, breathless, stumbled in, her scrubs slightly askew. "Dr. Wells," she gasped, holding up a sparkling diamond bracelet, its gems catching the dim light. "I found it, in the women's restroom, by the sink." Cella exhaled, relief flooding her like a tide, her baby shifting as if sensing the shift. James's gaze turned deadly, his anger now a focused beam. "So, my wife was detained over a lie," he said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of a guillotine. "Dr. Wells accused her of theft, had her dragged here, humiliated and isolated, for nothing." The guards froze, their faces paling. The older one muttered, "We were following orders." "Whose orders?" Marcus cut in, his phone now. Recording, the red light, a silent accusation. "Dr. Wells's? Because that's racial profiling, a federal offense." As if summoned, Dr. Catherine Wells stormed through the door, her white coat billowing, her blonde bun impeccable but her blue eyes wild with arrogance. "What's going on here?" she demanded, ignoring Cella, her gaze fixed on James and Marcus. "This is my hospital. You're causing a scene over a thief's tantrum." James stepped forward, towering over her, his presence a silent earthquake. "A thief?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Your bracelet was found. In a restroom, not with my wife. You falsely accused her, had her detained while pregnant, and humiliated her because of her race. That's not a scene, that's a crime." Catherine scoffed, unapologetic, her lips curling. "I had every reason to suspect her. She doesn't belong here alone in that cheap dress. You can't prove anything." Marcus raised his phone. "The recording light steady." "Care to repeat that, Dr. Wells? Racial profiling, false accusation, unlawful detainment, those are actionable, and we have the footage." Catherine's bravado faltered, her eyes darting to the monitors, then back to James. "This is absurd," she snapped, her voice rising. "I own 62% of this hospital. You think you can threaten me?" James's smile was cold, a predator's calm before the strike. "You're about to find out how wrong you are," he said, his words a promise etched in stone. He turned to Cella, his eyes softening. "We're getting you out of here." Cella rose, her hand still on her belly, her dignity unbroken despite the ordeal. She looked at Catherine, her voice clear and unshaken. "You saw me and decided I was nothing," she said, "but you don't know me, and you'll answer for this." Catherine's face twitched, her confidence fraying, but she held her ground, arms crossed. The nurse, still clutching the bracelet, backed away, her eyes wide with realization. The guards stood mute, their authority dissolved in the face of truth. James took Cella's hand, his touch a vow of protection. Marcus pocketed his phone, his gaze locked on Catherine. "We're not done," he said, his voice a warning. "This goes to the director." The room pulsed with tension, the fluorescent light buzzing like a trapped wasp. The truth had emerged, raw and undeniable. But the battle was far from over. James and Cella stepped toward the door, their unity a force that shook the room's foundations, leaving Catherine to face the first cracks in her empire. The elevator to Pacific Crest Medical Center's executive floor hummed with a deceptive calm, its mirrored walls reflecting the steely resolve of James Thompson, the quiet strength of Cella Thompson, and the razor-sharp focus of Marcus Reed. James, in his tailored navy suit, stood tall, his dark mahogany skin a stark contrast to the sterile surroundings, his hand clasped around Cella's. Cella, 7 months pregnant, her white floral maternity dress a symbol of her unbroken spirit, held, her chin high, her deep brown eyes burning with purpose. Marcus, the civil rights attorney, adjusted his tie, his badge glinting, his phone tucked away but still carrying the weight of Catherine Wells's recorded prejudice. The elevator doors parted, revealing a glass-walled corridor that led to the hospital's nerve center, where power was about to be challenged. The conference room was a fortress of modernity, its long glass table gleaming under bright overhead, lights flanked by sleek leather chairs. Dr. Alan Kessler, the hospital director, stood at the far end, his gray suit rumpled, his face pale with the strain of crisis. 3 board members, 2 men and a woman, all white, all visibly unsettled, sat stiffly, their folders unopened. Dr. Catherine Wells occupied the opposite end, her white coat discarded but her blonde bun impeccable, her blue eyes defiant despite the tremor in her crossed arms. She rose as James, Cella, and Marcus entered, her lips pursed, as if their presence were an insult to her domain. James's steps were measured, each one a drumbeat of intent, as he guided Cella to a chair opposite Catherine. He remained standing, his federal contractor's ID visible in his breast pocket, a silent declaration of authority. Marcus set a thin folder on the table, its contents a ticking bomb. Kessler cleared his throat, his voice strained. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Reed, we've convened to address this incident. We've reviewed preliminary footage and statements." Catherine scoffed, her voice cutting through the room like a whip. "This is a farce," she said, her eyes locked on Cella. "I followed protocol, acted on reasonable suspicion. This woman," she gestured dismissively, doesn't belong here, and her accusations are baseless. Cella's gaze met Catherine's, unflinching. You humiliated me, she said, her voice clear and steady, each word a stone laid in a wall of truth. You called me a nobody, implied I was abandoned, and accused me of stealing your bracelet because of my race. I'm a nurse, here for my baby's care, and you treated me like a criminal. Catherine's lips curled, unrepentant. You were alone in a cheap dress in my exam room. I had every right to suspect. Suspect what? James interrupted, his voice a low thunder, his eyes boring into Catherine's. That a black woman, pregnant and professional, was a thief? Your bracelet was found in a restroom, not with my wife. You had her detained, isolated, and endangered, all based on your prejudice, not evidence. Marcus opened the folder, sliding a USB drive and printed screenshots across the table. Security. Footage shows Cella never touched the counter, he said, his tone clinical but lethal. It shows Dr. Wells leaving the bracelet behind, then accusing Cella without cause. We also have audio, Dr. Wells' own words, admitting she targeted Cella for her appearance. He tapped his phone, the thread of playback hanging in the air. Catherine's face twitched, her confidence fracturing. You can't use that, she snapped, her voice rising. I own 62% of this hospital. You think you can intimidate me? With your little recording? Kessler's hands trembled as he adjusted his glasses. Dr. Wells, your shares don't exempt you from accountability. The footage is clear. Your actions were indefensible. Catherine laughed, a brittle, desperate sound. Indefensible? I protected this hospital's standards. She didn't belong. She belonged as much as any patient, Cella cut, in her voice rising with a fire that silenced the room. I'm a registered nurse, a wife, a mother-to-be. You didn't see me. You saw a stereotype. You called me, you people, mocked my clothes, and lied to have me detained. You endangered my baby. Her hand rested on her belly, her words a vow. I'm not here to be silenced, I'm here for justice. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, one shifting in his seat, another scribbling notes. James stepped forward, laying a typed document beside Marcus's folder. We're filing a federal civil rights complaint against Dr. Wells and Pacific Crest, he said, his voice calm but unyielding. Her actions violate patient rights and federal law. We demand her immediate termination, a public apology, mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, and a full review of hospital policies. Catherine's eyes widened, her arrogance crumbling. Termination? She sputtered. You don't have the power. We do, Marcus said, his voice a scalpel. Your conduct is actionable under Title VI. The DOJ will be notified by end of day. Your shares won't protect you from a federal investigation. Kessler's face was ashen, his voice cracking. Dr. Wells, the board has voted. Your actions constitute gross misconduct. You're terminated, effective immediately. We'll initiate a review of all protocols to prevent this from happening again. Catherine stood, her chair scraping back, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. This is my hospital, she shouted, her voice echoing off the glass walls. You'll regret this, all of you. She stormed toward the door, her heels clicking like gunfire, but no one followed. The room exhaled, the weight of her presence, lifting like a storm passing. Cella leaned into James, her body trembling but her spirit unbroken. He squeezed her hand, his eyes proud. You did it, he whispered. She nodded, tears brimming but unshed, her dignity a beacon in the sterile light. Kessler addressed the group, his tone conciliatory. We'll issue a public statement and comply with your demands. This hospital will do better. The board members nodded, their silence an admission of complicity. Marcus gathered his papers, his gaze steady. We'll ensure it, he said. This isn't just about Cella, it's about every patient who's been judged before they're seen. The conference room felt larger now, the glass walls no longer a cage but a window to change. Cella rose, her hand still in James's, her baby stirring as if sensing victory. The truth had dismantled Catherine's power, but the fight for justice was only beginning. The San Diego sky burned with the hues of a late summer sunset, casting a golden glow over the hills as Cella Thompson stood outside Pacific Crest Medical Center. 2 months had passed since the storm of that fateful morning, and now, cradled in her arms, was her newborn daughter, Hope, her tiny face a constellation of dreams yet to unfold. Cella's deep brown skin shimmered in the fading light, her simple white dress, now free of floral patterns, a nod to her new chapter, flowing softly around her. Her sharp eyes, once shadowed by fear, now blazed with purpose, her heart anchored by the weight of victory and the promise of change. Beside her stood James Thompson, his tailored navy suit replaced by a casual blazer, his dark mahogany skin radiant with pride, his hand resting gently on Cella's shoulder. The hospital's glass facade loomed behind them, no longer a fortress of judgment, but a monument to their triumph. The air was thick with anticipation. A crowd of community members, reporters, and advocates gathered before a makeshift podium. Microphones bristled like sentinels, cameras flashed, and murmurs rippled through the throng. Cella's journey had ignited a spark, her story spreading through San Diego like wildfire, a beacon for those who'd been silenced. She stepped forward, hope stirring in her arms, and the crowd hushed, their eyes fixed on the woman who'd faced power and won. "This isn't just my story," Cella began, her voice clear and resonant, each word a stone laid in a new foundation. "It's for every black woman who's walked into a room and been judged before she's known. It's for every mother who's fought for her child's safety, every professional who's been dismissed as less than. 2 months ago, I came to this hospital for care and was met with hatred. I was called a nobody, a thief, detained while pregnant because of the color of my skin. But I wasn't alone. My husband, James, and our friend Marcus Reed stood with me, and together, we exposed the truth." James squeezed her shoulder, his eyes gleaming with pride. The crowd murmured, a wave of agreement, their applause a quiet thunder. Cella's gaze swept over them, her heart swelling. She saw faces like hers, black women, mothers, nurses, nodding, their stories mirrored in her own. She saw allies, their fists raised in solidarity, and reporters scribbling furiously, capturing a moment that would echo beyond this day. "Pacific Crest failed me," Cella continued, her voice steady but fierce. "But it's changing. Dr. Catherine Wells, who owned 62% of this hospital, was terminated for her actions. The board issued a public apology, and new policies are in place. Anti-bias training, a patient rights charter, oversight to ensure no one is judged by their appearance. Marcus Reed is helping enforce these changes, holding this institution accountable." Marcus, standing nearby, nodded, his attorney's badge a silent testament to his role. The crowd erupted in cheers, the sound rolling over the hills like a tide. Cella paused, looking down at Hope, her daughter's tiny hand curling around her finger. "This is for you, Hope," she whispered, her voice catching, "for a world where you're seen for who you are, not what others assume." The hospital had transformed in the wake of Cella's stand. That evening, 2 months prior, Pacific Crest released a statement acknowledging the incident, vowing reform. Anti-bias training began within weeks, mandatory for every staff member, from janitors to surgeons. A patient rights charter was drafted, displayed in the lobby where Cella had once felt invisible. Marcus oversaw compliance, his legal expertise, ensuring the changes weren't just promises but practice. The board, shaken by the threat of federal scrutiny, had acted swiftly, severing Catherine's influence and redirecting her shares to a trust pending review. Cella's voice rose, carrying the weight of her journey. "This fight isn't over," she said, her eyes locking with the crowd's. "It's about systems that let prejudice go unchecked, about spaces that make us feel small so others can feel big. We're not invisible. We're not disposable. We're mothers, daughters, professionals, and we will change the world one truth at a time." The crowd roared, their applause a seismic force shaking the ground beneath Pacific Crest. James stepped closer, his arm around Cella, his pride a quiet fire. "You're incredible," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Cella smiled, tears brimming but unshed, her heart full. Hope gurgled softly, as if sensing the moment's weight, her tiny presence a symbol of the future they'd fought for. Reporters surged forward, their questions a flurry. "Mrs. Thompson, will you pursue further legal action?" one asked. Cella's response was measured. "We've filed a federal complaint to ensure accountability, but this isn't about revenge. It's about reform, about making sure no one else faces what I did." Another asked, "What's next for you?" Cella looked at Hope, then at James. "I'm a nurse, a mother, an advocate," she said. "I'll keep speaking, keep fighting, for my daughter and for every woman who deserves better." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and indigo, the crowd dispersed, their energy lingering like a promise. Cella and James walked to their car, Hope nestled against her mother's chest. The hospital stood behind them, its glass walls reflecting the last rays of light, a reminder of the battle won and the work ahead. In the weeks that followed, Cella became a local voice, speaking at community centers, meeting with hospital boards, and mentoring young Black women in healthcare. Her story inspired petitions, policy reviews, and a renewed call for equity in San Diego's medical system. James, ever her rock, supported her, his love a constant in the whirlwind of change. Hope grew, her bright eyes a daily reminder of why they'd fought. As they drove home, the city lights twinkling below, Cella looked at James. "We did this," she said softly. He nodded, his hand finding hers. "And we're just getting started." The road ahead was long, but Cella's stand had carved a path, a legacy of courage that would endure for Hope and beyond. Thank you for joining us on Cella's powerful journey, a story of courage, justice, and hope that resonates far beyond these moments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What moved you, what inspired you, and where you're listening from. Drop a comment below to share your reflections and connect with others touched by this tale. Your voice matters, just as Cella's did. A heartfelt thank you for being part of this story with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to catch our next tale of triumph and truth. Until then, keep shining, keep standing, and we'll see you soon for another unforgettable story.